there's this pivot in marketing where it's like, oh, we have to talk about brand. We're all about brand. And that's where I think it starts to break down because sales cares about brand as long as they can continue selling, but I don't think they care about all the nuances of brand that a marketer necessarily cares about.
Welcome back to Thoughts on Selling. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to have Sean Gannon join me to talk about all things selling. And I've warned Sean ahead of time that we're going to ask a question that nobody else has been able to effectively answer yet. And the question is, who is Sean Gannon?
Hi, everyone. So Sean Gannon, I'm a sales guy at heart. I'm the founder of GTM PPL or GTM People. GTMPeople.com is the website. And we're a sales consultancy. We help organizations with a wide variety of sort of building their revenue engines and making sure that they're able to scale operationally. One of the things that I'm hoping, Lee, that we'll get into, generally I was thinking about it beforehand, is this kind of odd management thought that I've had over the years of managing different teams. And I've worked predominantly in EdTech, a host of different companies from Starfish Retention Solutions to Parchment to Instructure. Like I view my role as an executive or a sales manager. And this is almost the antithesis of many individuals I've worked for, is to make myself obsolete. Like I should be relatively invisible as your manager. And if I'm not invisible, then I'm not doing my job. And I think I've said that to people before and they're like, that's weird. And I don't know if you've run into that with other folks that you've interviewed, but I thought that would be an odd way to start a podcast.
Well, obsolete and invisible are two very different things. At Oracle, when we were doing field sales enablement, our job was to make ourselves obsolete every year. And the first time I heard that, I didn't really get it. It's like, well, what about job security? My good friend Wayne Jones said, screw that. There's so much more to work on. If we take on a major project and bring the sales organization up to speed on that area and sales leadership, and we can hand that off, yeah, we've made ourselves obsolete on that piece. It's a target-rich environment. There's so much more to choose from. The job of the enabler is never done. Invisible? Absolutely. The best sales enablement, you don't know it's being done to you. You don't know it's being done for you. When the salesperson's out in the field, it's not your voice that's echoing in their head, usually, right? Hopefully it's the voice of the customer that's bouncing around in their head. And so, yeah, we absolutely should be invisible. I like that. Invisibility, the cloak of invisibility. Now, Sean, you talked about odd management. I've experienced some odd management before. We'll leave that alone. Let's talk about GTM.
Okay.
What does go-to-market mean to you?
Go-to-market. So I think at its core, I truly believe that every market-facing person at a company sells in one way or another. Whether they're selling to their boss, they're selling to their clients that they're servicing, if they're doing a renewal, for example, or if they're obviously on the sales side, they're clearly selling if they're doing their job. And so at its core, it's how can we have scalable structures across all of those organizations that are front facing that meet the goals of the company, whatever that is, and it's usually just revenue growth for the most part. But also, it could also be like if you are on the CSM side, it could be about client satisfaction and NPS scores and making sure that you're getting really good sort of results there and people are getting sort of the renewal rates are going up, all of that stuff. But everyone sells is probably at the core of it.
Yeah, everyone sells. And if you take a short skip over to the formal marketing organization, the people in marketing should be working hand in hand in concert with the GTM folks. I kind of think GTM is separate from marketing. Do you?
I do not. I actually think so. I worked for a CMO who may want to punch me when she hears me say this. Like, she always hated when I would say marketing provides air cover. She hated the term air cover. We're the 50,000 foot. We're peppering the market with various messages and other things. And then sales are more, I guess, sort of on the ground and snipers and whatnot, just to use the military analogy. And so I think like getting a marketing org, and one of the things we did at Parchment, which I think was really helpful, which I will give the CMO credit for, was we wanted to get everyone to be numbers focused as the sales reps were. That marketing should be thinking in like how much in opportunities can we create through our marketing programming and everything else that goes into that. So I think that was a bit of a thing that I noticed with Parchment, one of the companies that I worked at, that they did really, really well. And it started at the leadership level. And then that also got in line because then everyone was speaking the same language. Usually I've seen marketing organizations go, we do all this stuff. Sales, you go do your thing. And then that's the two don't meet. And if they do meet, it's great and everyone's happy. But I think the orgs that do it best coordinate and work really well together across marketing and sales.
I'm in agreement with you. Years ago, I spoke with a CMO who kind of had an insular view of marketing. I asked him about his perspective on conversion and close rates. And he said to me, I won't mention his name. Hopefully he's retired by now or moved on to something more useful for his particular skill set. But he said to me, I don't give a shit what happens to a lead. I throw those leads over the wall and I'm done with them. And I looked at him and I said, well, just leave 3 envelopes for your successor. It boggled my mind that in this, it's not today's environment. This was a few years ago. But in that environment, he said that out loud. And conversely, at about the same time, Salesforce had announced sales and marketing own the same metrics, period, full stop.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I think so. I will admit to sort of having that thought, but almost in a compartmentalized way. So we would often get into, I would say, very robust discussions with sales leadership over sort of marketing sourced ops over the years. And to a certain extent, what this individual is saying, I think, is kind of like accurate in a vacuum, if you will. Like, yes, marketing, once we throw the op over, it's out of our hands. A sales rep is going to either close it or not. But what marketing should be doing is only throwing over the fence to sales those really well sourced ops, like this, the ops that are most likely to close. Marketing should still care about the close one rate in the end. But if you kind of just like go, great, marketing's responsible for sort of sourcing that top of the funnel. And then it's going to go through the funnel and it's kind of out of our control a little bit. But what is in our control is how are we getting those folks in there? How are we qualifying them? If in our case, the SDR organization was a part of marketing, so we were in charge of qualifying and all of those. So we were still monitoring those close one rates, but there was a certain compartmentalization to say, where if someone wanted to trip you up in, say, a board level meeting and go, well, what is the closed one rate for these marketing sourced ops? Well, yeah, then you'd have to kind of have that discussion. But like marketing could appear as making your number at that top of the funnel mark, but maybe not having the same close one rates as, say, sales originated ops or those types of things. So I found that to be, yes, in theory, but you still need to care about close one rates, absolutely, of your ops.
You absolutely do. And I'll throw in 2 different brief stories. Years ago, I did some work with Rich Vansel at IDC. I was on the sales operations side. He was on the marketing side. And I said, okay, Rich, what does it cost for a lead, right? And he says, depending on the company, $1, $3, $50. And I said, okay, what does it cost to double the leads into the top of the funnel? It's like, well, you take $50 times whatever, and that's what you get. I said, okay, what does it take to double the number of opportunities that get through stage 1 to stage 2? Well, that takes a very small amount of effort on conversion, which might be sales enablement, it might be sales operations, it might be marketing supported. The work inside the funnel to improve conversion within the funnel is dramatically more effective than increasing spend on initial leads. So there's that one thing. And then second, my son's doing some work with a company in the healthcare space, and he comes to that organization with 10 years of working in a similar company. And so he's talking to customers every day, which he's done for 15 years now. And he looked at the messaging on the website and he tweaked it. And in the space of under 30 days, the close rate went from 11 to 28%.
Just from tweaked language.
Yeah. And duration in funnel dropped by 50%.
Wow.
Because they were now collecting, and this is a B2C offer, so slightly different than B2B, but it's an expensive B2C service offer. It's $1,000 to a $5,000 luxury purchase, as it were, health-related purchase. And just by tweaking the language that he was able to suss out using like ChatGPT on transcripts, right? What are people responding to? He was then able to take that language, pass it to marketing and say, let's tweak the language, the external facing language, and he got those results.
That's impressive. Normally you pay an agency $100,000 to do that.
Well, he's wicked smart, as we say in Boston. He lives in your town now, as I think we talked about. He's wicked smart. He knows the space. So sometimes you can have really strong results like that. Sometimes they're a little bit more nuanced. And so the throw it over the wall really stuck with me because I think of go to market as a dance between sales and marketing. And it should be a virtuous circle, a virtuous ongoing circle of conversation.
Yeah, 100%. I think the thing that I've never been able to, and I've worked a bunch of different companies and then even consulted with some that I haven't seen many companies do it well. That doesn't mean there aren't companies out there that are doing this amazingly, but most of the places that I've worked are really good about filling that top of the funnel, but they don't know how to affect it in funnel. And I worked with a really great demand gen director, and he was just laser focused on trying to improve. Great, you're going to go from prospect to advanced prospect to pending sale, and then this to close one. How can we affect it in pipe? I'm always intrigued with companies that it's like, okay, have you guys solved all these other issues? And now you can kind of focus on this about how to get more efficient in sort of pipeline.
I was fascinated by Jonathan's recent experience. I mean, he shared the data with me and it was mind blowing. And he had it. He was looking at HubSpot data, looking at conversion rates and close rates, and it was all laid out in front of him. No doubt about the impact. Let's talk about sales enablement. You and I, Sean, we've both have spent a lot of time in sales enablement. When you hear the phrase sales enablement, what do you think of?
Boring sales trainings, or basically like looking out across the room and people being like, I got to check like that, check their phones and things like that. That's what I think of.
So I got to tell you this. I was running a workshop at Oracle's headquarters, facilitating a workshop on, I think it was the autonomous data warehouse. And I'm in the back of the room. Someone else was talking and I'm just snooping, looking at people's screens. And I swear to God, in the back of the room, there's this woman filling out a job application for Salesforce. It's like, you need some help with that? It is what it is. That's a perspective on sales enablement.
That was my sarcastic perspective.
Thank you very much.
But I would say, I mean, the overall goal of enablement, and this is going to be me being Captain Obvious for about a second, is to enable the success of the sales team and make sure that they're utilizing, whether that could be sales training, that could be you're presenting the slides in the way that we want to, all the way over to here's how you optimize the use of XYZ platform that we're utilizing at the company that we've invested in to make sure you're getting the most out of it. One example that I'll give is we had adopted, like a sales loft outreach, those types of tools for our team. And I had heard from individuals internally that they were still doing mail merges with Microsoft Word. And that we can automate a lot of this in these platforms, and then realized that we had to do a really robust training to get people on board with it, to handhold them through it, because they were so used to doing it an older way.
There's nothing wrong with Word and mail merge. I still use it to fundraise to 250 people once a year for a charity ride that I do.
That's good.
But yeah, in business, not so much. Yeah. Number one, you can insert mistakes that are not individual mistakes. They can be systemic mistakes, which can be really bad.
Yeah, no, I witnessed it. We've had a few reps over the years where when we would train them to utilize the system, we didn't admittedly put the right sort of guardrails in place that they couldn't. We had one rep who accidentally emailed our entire database in about 48 hours, and we had to flag his account and all this other stuff. So not fun.
You weren't the only one that flagged his account, right?
Yeah, I know.
There were some external sites that also flagged that same account.
Yes. Yeah, that was like strike 2 on Google.
The other issue is that, if someone's doing it from their desk, it's not trackable. It's not reportable. You don't have visibility into. When I would onboard new hires, one of the questions they would always ask me is, so if I go into the Oracle CRM, can I find the entire history of the account in there with all the records and transactions and stuff? Invariably, I would say to them, I can give you one of two answers. I can either give you the answer that you want to hear, which is yes, of course.
Yes.
Or I can give you the answer that's the truth, which is, are you freaking kidding me? This is Oracle.
They don't have that.
They don't have that. Nobody spends time feeding no one ever spent time feeding the monster because, with regard to CRM, it all in the past it had been for the manager, not the rep.
Interesting. Okay. I take a different view of that, but yeah, that perspective is interesting. And especially now with a lot of the tools that are available of automatically getting that data in there and not creating admin work for the sales rep, I think the CRM can be inherently valuable. But there are very large companies like Oracle out there operating today where I've talked to sales reps who have said, this CRM is absolutely unusable, and I do all my work out of an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, and it's a loss for all because there's no tribal knowledge, there's no institutional knowledge, and the rep is doing a lot more work than they have to.
100%. The other thing is, and this from my role in marketing that it does bother me is that marketing doesn't get the benefit of, oh, you had an interaction with them. Maybe we lost a deal. Well, that means we're going to put them in a different nurture sequence than we would normally. And if you don't put that in there, we don't know.
In my experience, most organizations don't run sales and marketing as a system or series of connected systems. They run them as a series of petri dishes. Let's put something in there and see what grows. And usually, you know what happens when you expose a petri dish with culture for a while, right? You know what you get.
Bad stuff. Yes. Bacteria, mold, who knows?
Yep.
Fungus, if you're lucky, it doesn't, who knows? It's crazy.
It's conducive to growth, but not to business benefit.
Yeah. I truly believe like some of the best orgs I've seen, the CMO and the CRO, or even equivalent if it's a smaller org, VP of sales and VP of marketing, should be hand in hand.
Yeah. And I think a lot of smaller companies benefit from size and agility and recency of formation. They take all this stuff as a given, like, oh, there are all these tools out there that interact and provide benefit, and we don't have to think much about it. We're not going to host any of it. It all happens. We just put a credit card into the cloud and good stuff happens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's important. I think it's like when companies get larger, which is great because that means they're successful, people are buying their services. There's this pivot in marketing where it's like, oh, we have to talk about brand. We're all about brand. And that's where I think it starts to break down because sales cares about brand as long as they can continue selling, but I don't think they care about all the nuances of brand that a marketer necessarily cares about.
I have a couple of coaching clients at a big 3-letter company that I won't name, but they frequently hear from their customers, what does that 3-letter name company stand for these days? It's lost its way. I don't know who it is. And it's largely accurate. You can't point at that 3-letter company and go, this is what they do, right? This is what they used to do and they still do it. This is what they used to say they were going to do and we don't know whether they're doing it. And for a salesperson to spend time explaining the corporate focus, the corporate why, as opposed to focusing on what the customer cares about, that's friction in the system, as it were.
Yeah. 100% agree. I think, sales should be there to talk about value, and that value needs to be contextual to the individual that may be writing you a check and not to just the universe in general. That's, again, marketing's job to kind of start to thread that needle and to talk about the broader values of the company, but sales is tactical. It's hand-to-hand combat.
Usually, and not always, as part of my onboarding of new inside salespeople, I would always say, you might be the first touch that the customer has ever experienced with regard to your company's brand, even with big companies, even with Big Red. This may be the first touch. The customer may go, I don't know who you are, right? And again, big household name in the tech space. I don't know who you are. And so it's up to you, Mr. Inside Salesperson, who 2 weeks ago was at Senior Week, and now you're wearing a red, Team Oracle t-shirt. Now it's up to you to actually think about how you carry yourself and not just, hi, this is Charlie, I want to talk about blah, but be a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, I think it's important. I've run multiple SDR teams over the years or inside sales. I know people use different terms, SDR, BDR, all that stuff. It is one of the things that I like to instill in them is what you exactly said. You are the very first human experience that they are having with our company. Therefore, you want to be helpful. You want to be forthright. You want to be upfront with them. All of that stuff to try and get them to go, oh yeah, I'll schedule a meeting or I'll, do XYZ with you to get them to that next stage. We always talked about your goal with SDR isn't to sell the company, isn't to sell the solution. It's to sell the meeting. Your job is to sell the meeting. You know what, Lee? That's a really good question. Our regional manager would be happy to meet with you next Friday at 10 o'clock if you'd like to. It's to just get that to the next step in a respectful way, but still answer whatever questions they have along the way within reason. But I think about like your point about authenticity is we would always train people to go, do not make it up if you don't know the answer. It is okay to be like, that is a really great question. And then your key is pivot to our RSM would likely know that. We get that question a lot and pivot.
I don't know is a perfectly good answer.
It also builds, I think, and a lot of the sales trainings and sales psychology goes into this. It builds incredible rapport because someone isn't BSing you about something.
Yeah. So I'm working with an inside sales guy. He's a rock star. I met him on a cold call. He cold called me And he started off with a brief intro, and I forced a pivot. And I said, Shay, tell me a little bit about my company. What do you know about my company? And Shay, using his real first name, did a fabulous job following that pivot on my request. And he gave me a 30-second spiel on my company.
Fantastic. He'd done his research.
He had. And I said, Shay, good news and bad news. The good news is you did a great job. The bad news is you have bad data. That's not my company. And he goes, I'm so sorry. And I said, before you disconnect, I'm really impressed with your passion and your energy and your skill set. Let's spend some time coaching. And I've been coaching him just for fun, right? No money changes hands. I've been coaching him since May. And we have an absolute blast. I love to help more junior people get a running start. I was just at Bryant University helping with their national sales competition. And oh my gosh, sophomores in college who know how to build rapport with a challenging prospect. Unbelievable. Really good stuff. Yeah. So Shay, a couple of months ago, said, my numbers are really good, but my meetings suck. And he said, I'm getting a lot of meetings. I'm getting commitment for a lot of meetings. I'm also getting a lot of no-shows. So when you talked about landing the meeting, it's not sufficient. It's landing the meeting and getting commitment to the meeting. So we looked at that and we said, okay, what is it about, why does someone accept the meeting and then no-show? Because they're not fully bought in, right?
Or maybe you're just so convincing that they're like, how can I get this guy off the phone?
Well, so convincing, yes.
Or persistent, yeah.
Persistent. And then separately, it's like, how do I get this guy off the phone? And what Shay worked on was more effectively landing the value prop, right? Not just the meeting, not just the initial, here's why I think you should be interested, but also making sure that that value prop had landed, right? Really not just getting the hook in the mouth. So, and I hate this analogy, not just getting the hook in the mouth, but also setting it, as it were.
Yeah.
Ouch! I hate it. Makes me uncomfortable every time I say it. There's a reason why they call it fishing and not catching, right? I do my best fishing at the counter. I'd like a pound of wild salmon, please.
Yes, thank you. That's all.
Yeah, there's no fishing involved there. It's taking. It's just handing over. So he worked on that, and his numbers came up quite significantly because he was now being intentional. And this is why I love working with him. He's being intentional. He's working on his craft, right? He's working on various components of his craft so that he is a professional. Welcome to Selling Shay. He's a true professional in that he works on his craft in the same way that a professional baseball player will work on his swing or work on his catching or work on his base running individually, right? This is the deliberate zooming out. It's the deliberate practice of portions of the skill set that make a top-notch salesperson really effective. They look at the various components and say, I really want to build my wax on, wax off skills.
It provides a really nice inflection point as well. And I think it's just natural to the sales process, whether you're an SDR or, a full cycle sales rep, is that like moving from suspect to prospect or prospect to advanced prospect, it provides a good inflection point because if you're not moving them or you're having difficulty getting to that advanced prospect, okay, then there might be something you're doing wrong, and it's reflection, coaching, all sorts of things that you can look into, whether yourself or if you have really good management or in Lee, your case, a really good coach to kind of help that person along.
So speaking of coaches, Sean, what's your perspective on the amount of coaching that happens in sales organizations today?
I think it's minimal overall. I will admit, here's the thing. I think I am a terrible coach. I think I am a terrible coach because it's not something that is innate to me. And it took an individual who I think was on this podcast before, Matt Stinson, who you had interviewed. He is very much sort of entrenched in coaching. And he was sort of my deputy at Parchment on the sales side. He really helped me to pivot my thinking around coaching in that, because I was always like, all right, Lee, let's see, where are your numbers? You're this against this. How are we going to get a blah, blah. Like I was and I had 82 million spreadsheets to kind of look at, to evaluate. And when I shifted to coaching, it just changed kind of the trajectory of the team, where we went from like 18-month retention to 36-month retention. And then with that retention, of course, then people are making their number on a more regular basis. So I think coaching, some of the best orgs, sales orgs, focus on coaching. And that I was like, admittedly, I was wrong for years. And it took me a long time to realize that. But this is why I think it's like good. You bring in different folks and different people and they challenge your ideas, as long as you have to be open to that.
Yeah, Matt's a real guru on this. What you described was inspection rather than coaching. And that's, from what I've seen, that's most of what sales managers do, right? I need to report up. How are your numbers? Where's the risk? Where's the softness? Where's your commit? Where's your upside? What's happening on this deal? And there's nothing in that conversation for the rep except panic. And as a counterpoint, when I took over sales, I was the chief sales officer at an organization called By Appointment Only. We were about a $10 million company when I joined, and most of my team had come from the delivery side. And the delivery side of By Appointment Only was setting appointments. And the mechanics were 250 calls a day per person.
Oof.
250 calls a day. So these people were used to dials and short conversations. And invariably, they might have 4 or 5 different personas based on who they were calling for. So if they were calling for HP, they'd be Charlie. If they were calling for Akamai, they'd be Bill. And so it was kind of weird for them. 2/3 of my team came from that 250 a day. And it's like, now you're calling on HP and IBM and others and many smaller companies. And now it's not a 30-second conversation. Now you want to have a 30-minute conversation about how our appointment setting can help drive early pipe for their sales team. And so I spent 50% of my time coaching because that's what they needed. They needed to move their skill set from highly transactional to a value selling approach.
Focus on quality.
Yeah, exactly. As a result of that focus, we increased revenues by 75% over 18 months.
Well, I also imagine how was like staff retention? Because 250 calls a day, I would imagine like your average was like, oh, I'm a sales rep for a week and then I leave. Like I would imagine your retention rates of your sales team members must have gone up as well as a result of that coaching cadence.
Well, this was the delivery team that did that. And BAO is really a master at resource management. So they gamified that system. Right. So the person responsible for recruiting, he was not a genius. He was a wizard, Henry Glickel, absolute wizard at identifying prospects that can survive in that relationship. So I would do some onboarding and I'd look at these resumes and I go, Henry, what the hell? You've got a landscaper, you've got a hairstylist, you've got someone that was in field sales for 20 years. I see no commonalities across this group of 8 people. And invariably 5 of them would be there at least 6 months. So he saw the attitudes and skills underneath whatever their title was, whatever their experience was, to see this person can thrive in this really challenging environment. And so then the organization, you would walk into the delivery floor and they were set up in teams and there was team competition, there was individual competition, and there were leaderboards and there were whiteboards and there were bells that were rung, then there were team pizzas and it was highly gamified and really well managed. I enjoyed working there just because of the team dynamics. It was truly well thought out. And here's an interesting example of how well thought out things were. Jim, the CEO, and I were meeting with a prospective client on a large deal, big technology company, large deal. And just as we're kind of wrapping things up, Jim says, so what might cause this project to fail? And I'm thinking, dude, we're about to get the contract signed. Why the hell are you, inserting potential stops in this thing? I chatted with him afterwards and he said, we are purely a pay on performance organization. And he goes, as the CEO, I want to know in advance if there's something that's going to get in the way. And then we'll either figure out how we can accommodate it or we're going to back off. Right. So, let's say someone says, we don't put things into CRM for 2 weeks. And so as a result, we don't track activity that well, or we're constantly shuffling reps. So you might get an appointment with one person and then it gets changed and that might spook the prospect. So we want to know those, right? Can we accommodate this? Or is this a structural problem that will cause us not to get paid for our meeting? We would make the investment in in training the team and setting meetings, and then 6 or 8 weeks later get paid. And even growth caused some issues there because even though we were growing and we were successful, we were getting paid, we were investing way ahead of getting paid. I found it absolutely fascinating. And as someone who's been in professional services a good amount, I now really like that question.
I like that question too. I would have, I think, similarly had been like, what are you doing? Like, dude, like not at the, it would be early or mid through there to identify like, hey, what are some potential pitfalls with this project that you guys see? I'd like to talk through them. Not right before signing. And I shared that. I would also freak out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the going negative or being real is a very effective selling tool, right? If you can be authentic enough to say, listen, I have some concerns. How collectively are we going to get through them? Then the customer says, oh, you've got skin in the game too, and you actually want this to be successful. You're not just ringing the bell and walking away.
Yeah, we've talked about this before a little bit when we spoke last week. I'm a big proponent of Sandler and like sales psychology in general. Sandler, I think, is just really good. There's a lot of different ones out there, Medic and Challenger Sale and all the others. But I think the ones that are the most successful build rapport through like prospects and individuals like to have control over whatever the next step will be. No one likes the used car salesman type of tactics where we're trying to get you to that sort of next step in the process. And so utilizing those no's throughout a sales cycle, I think is a really powerful tool that I haven't seen people do it like innately. I think people need to be trained to do it, but it's a really powerful tool. I agree.
Yeah. So in improv, every statement is an offer. It doesn't matter whether it's, this is the best thing since sliced bread, or no, we're never going to buy, or anything in between. It's just an offer. And what you as the salesperson choose to do with it is the important thing. With regard to Sandler, I went through the Sandler course with a good friend many, many years ago, and I loved the learning. I loved the energy behind the learning. And the pieces that I find relevant to enterprise sales, no one puts a picture of the submarine on the wall going, I'm going to go close, Abbott Labs, right? Okay, I'm now in, the front compartment of Abbott Labs. The parts that I love are the going negative and the upfront contract. I use those every day, right? The upfront contract, if this is what you're asking, what are you willing to do in return, right? Because so many salespeople go, oh, you want me to bring 27 experts? Great, happy to do it, without any question of, and who's going to be there, and what's the quid pro quo, and who are you going to bring, and right, is this going to be a balanced thing? Versus just, we're going to shovel resources at you and hope that you say yes.
And I think like the no pain, no sale, that is pretty sort of table stakes. But the FFC, or firm future commitment, where you don't end a meeting without having sort of another, that's something we just drilled into sales reps' heads to the point where we'd be listening to gong calls. And it's like, you tried twice to set a meeting, you should have tried a third time to just nail that person down and get it out there. Because the thing I always hated seeing is, oh, we had a great meeting, I'm going to call them in a week and schedule another meeting. And you're like, damn it.
I think that's so fundamental to how salespeople should operate. I don't remember that as being part of Sandler, and it absolutely is. And then the pain funnel, that's a Sandler foundation. And I don't often remember that as a Sandler foundation, just as a foundation.
I'll tell you a little quick story on the pain funnel. I was responsible for picking a chat solution for a company I work for, and we engaged a bunch of different chat companies, started talking to them. And I could tell with one of them, they had just gone through Sandler training. And it was just because of the pain funnel, the questions that they were asking. And I was already like, I had done my homework and I was pretty much sold on them. I had to stop the salesperson and go, listen, like, you need to stop taking me through the pain funnel. Like, I know you're trying to do the submarine and we're here. And I am already sold on this. Like, I want to move forward. Let's go to pricing and like, let's talk through those things. And he just kept going, well, it sounds like, and I'm like, oh no, like he's still continuing to do this. Eventually we got past it and we had a great relationship with them, but I love seeing it in the wild. I'm like, okay, I recognize what you're doing there.
In a situation like that, I wish I had Mark Cuban on record so I could be able to play Stop Selling, Start Negotiating from Shark Tank, or Kevin O'Leary. It's time to stop. I saw some of that yesterday in the NISC preliminaries. A salesperson it's a 10-minute slot. You're at 9.5 minutes. You need to pivot to getting that meeting, committed. Stop selling.
Yeah, you're beating a dead horse at that point. You need to pivot over.
Either it's sold or it's not. Move on. And if it's not sold, you're not moving on. If it is sold, you better move on. Yeah, funny stuff. So, Sean, where can people find you these days?
So they can find me at GTMPPL.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and posting regularly on sort of just observations and other things like that. Yeah, so that's it. And I'm here in lovely Boulder, Colorado, which I absolutely love, and getting outdoors and everything like that. But yeah, that's where I can be found.
This podcast is sponsored by McGuckin Hardware from Boulder, Colorado, who has everything in the world you need except lumber.
Lumber.
Yeah. And the Netherlands Tourist Bureau. Go to Netherlands. Have a sandwich.
Have a sandwich. Yes. Ride the carousel is amazing in Netherlands. Yep.
What's an ideal client look like for you, Sean?
I would say ideal client is like a mission-driven client. EdTech is sort of my sweet spot, but SaaS and anyone that really wants to kind of scale and get into that wonderful hockey stick is usually where you're in that sort of lower part. But EdTech companies that are looking to scale, and I've advised quite a few over the years, just with anything from hey, we got a contract with this weird BOCES thing in New York State, too. We need to completely redo our comp plans, all of that stuff.
Yeah, BOCES is a special education division in New York State.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Most people don't know what that acronym stands for outside of New York, and inside New York, they do. So what are the typical problems or issues or opportunities that these customers present you with? Going a little bit further down into their pain funnel.
Sure. You're already halfway through the submarine right now. So I would say like a lot of it is sort of like go-to-market challenges. There may be things like we need to get certain data, whether that could be from iPads or utilizing MDR if you're sort of a K-12 focused company and sort of building out your database, and here are the stats that are really important. So building the foundation for any sort of go-to-market engine and establishing that. It could be creating demand gen type campaigns. It could be anything from like rolling out customer advocacy. And I have some folks that I work with who have rolled out podcasts and other things like that for different ed tech companies. So it really kind of runs the gamut to that. And it could even be down to, doing some very light kind of sales training and go-to-market training for kind of small teams. But it's really about sort of solving specific go-to-market issues. There was one company that I was speaking with where they needed to have a playbook for what could sales offer in a negotiation and what needs to be escalated to, say, the CFO or legal counsel, as well as like, hey, we need to really sort of lock down when we negotiate this legal term or that legal term, which is, I think, like as a company scales, that becomes ever more important so that you're not in legal review for 12 weeks. It's taking 4.
So it sounds like, by and large, you're taking on projects that build the foundation for scalable growth.
Correct.
Cool. Well, this has been fascinating. Another enjoyable conversation.
It's been great for me as well, Lee, and you're a wonderful podcast host. So thank you. I love all the questions. And you were right. This is very much like a conversation. I was expecting something. I don't know what I was expecting, but this was very much just like two people talking, which is nice.
There we go. Okay, so Sean, here we go. Chocolate or vanilla? Choose.
Vanilla.
Why? Why do you choose vanilla?
I just like vanilla.
There you go.
I choose it. That's it.
I choose vanilla because I choose vanilla. Wonderful. Next time I'm in Boulder, we'll take a walk through McGuckins and see how they're performing.
I will gladly meet you down there. We can grab a coffee. There's a coffee place right there. And then we can go into McGuckins.
Sounds like fun. Thanks, Sean.
All right. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks.
Bye.
Another deep dive into the topic of sales excellence and the performance mindset. If you found this conversation interesting, I would appreciate it if you would share the podcast with a coworker or two. And to explore this topic in more depth, send me a note via the contact form on podcast.thoughtsonselling.com or find some time for us to talk at meet.acellergroup.com. Thanks.